Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started at 8:30, Andy. John, who's kicking this off?
Yeah, we can, in the interest of time, so we don't get too far behind before we even get started. Let's get started. This is our second of two workshops, at least just two for now, might be more in the future, but these turned out to be really timely, focusing on primarily transportation issues, but other infrastructure issues as well, which includes an item that we have on the agenda this morning. But three items in particular that we're going to cover: transportation electrification opportunities, with a presentation by CDOT, Michael King at CDOT, and we'll turn to him here in just a moment. And then a presentation update on Front Range Passenger Rail, also by CDOT, Spencer Dodge. And then we're also going to talk about Northern El Paso County Regional Water Project that folks at Monument and a few special districts have been coordinating on. They made a presentation to the county commissioners last week, and we thought it's germane to what we do as far as tracking federal infrastructure stuff. So wanted to get this presented as well. And then after that, John and I are just going to riff a little bit on the latest that we've heard on the greenhouse gas emissions rulemaking, which we've been talking about a lot, which was due to be dropped last Friday. And I think it was finally filed, but we haven't seen it yet. But we'll also talk about another issue that's been on our minds around federal funding equity issues for transportation funding. So we thought that was relevant to the legislative committee's discussions that we've been having lately. So anything else, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, before we get started? And we can introduce who's in the room so folks on the Zoom know who's here too.
Stan Vanderwerf, just thrilled to be here and listen to the presentations. I'm looking forward to it. That's all I've got. Let's get going.
Okay. Not going to do introductions everybody on the Zoom because we can see your names at least, but why don't we do introductions in the room real quick? I'll get started and we'll go around this way. Andy Gunning with PPACG.
Jill Gabler, Front Range Passenger Rail.
Don Wilson, Mayor Monument.
Mike Foreman, Town Monument Manager.
Sorry, John Graham, Mayor, Manitou Springs.
Nancy Hensham, City Council. Colorado Springs.
Antonio Huerta, Senator Hickenlooper Southern Colorado Regional Director.
Stan Vanderwerf, El Paso County Commissioner.
Sharon Thompson, Fountain City Council.
John Leosados, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments.
And Jessica
Bechtel, PPACG.
running the show. Okay, well, super. John, anything, or do you want to introduce Michael?
Yeah, no, time is better spent having Michael's talk than me. So without further ado, Michael.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
I'm looking up at the screen and I see Senator Bennett, and I just want to make sure, is that Senator Bennett's office or the senator himself? Because if the senator is there, we should welcome him.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Senator Bennett or the Senator Bennett's office?
Just the office. I'm a representative taking notes.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your being here and look forward to the presentation. Thanks.
So with that, we asked Michael to come and talk to us. Now, the background is when the SB 260 was passed, there are actually 5 enterprises, 3 of which concentrate on the electrification. And I think each one of them is in a different office, transportation, CDPHE, and I forget the other one, but I'm sure Michael will tell us. So even though Michael's sort of the expert of the one in the DOT, he's going to try to touch on all 3 of them and give you the information you need as to the programs that are getting started up and how they're going to work and how we can apply for the funds. So with that, Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you all. John, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. Well, thank you very much to the staff and membership of PPACG for inviting me today. As John said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the transportation electrification opportunities in the state of Colorado, including the new enterprises, but also providing hopefully a little bit of background on the existing efforts that have been underway to date and some of the trends and patterns that we see in the industry developing in Colorado and across the country. And as John indicated, I represent CDOT. We work very closely with other state agency partners on this effort, as well as many private companies, local governments, et cetera. So While I will attempt to answer as many questions as I can, there will be elements of this that might be the expertise of somebody else, and I'm happy to connect the PPACG to those resources moving forward. So let me launch into this, and I don't know if there's a preference for saving questions till the end, but I can't really see the video once I start the slides here, so please just speak up and let me know if there is a question or comment during the course of the presentation, or if we want to save those to the end.
Hey, Michael, yeah, we'll keep an eye on the chat, and if somebody asks a question that looks like we need to catch it right then,
Great.
I'll sort of butt in, interrupt you, and I'll read the chat.
Sounds good.
Otherwise, just keep going through, and then we'll hold questions to the end. But there might be ones where you have a certain graphic up, and it might make sense to go ahead and interrupt you
Exactly.
then. So thanks.
Great. All right. Thank you all very much then. Let me get started. So the current state of electric vehicle or EV registrations in Colorado, I think this is a good place to start. It gives you a sense of the context where we are. Currently just short of 40,000 in the state of Colorado. You can see the map on the left there showing the county of registration, and probably no surprise that we see a concentration on the Front Range, and in particular Boulder County, Jefferson County, Denver County. But you also do see some uptake on the western slope along I-70 at this point. To a note on the breakdown below, there are two major types of what we consider electric vehicles. Battery electric vehicles, BEVs, which get all of their power from a battery that is carried by the vehicle. So if you think of a Tesla, that's an example there. There are also PHEVs, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And these are vehicles that have both a battery that can operate the entire vehicle without an engine, but they also have an internal combustion engine. You see fewer of those right now registered in the state, but they do have certain benefits given that they can operate as an internal combustion engine or as a purely electric engine or both at the same time. So I also pulled some of the data. Both of these maps are from the Colorado Energy Office's zero emission vehicle registration page, which you see the link there at the bottom. This is in El Paso County. I'll be very clear. I understand that PPACG and El Paso County are not one and the same, but a lot of our registration data is broken down by county. So you can see a similar sort of breakdown, I think, in El Paso County of about 2/3 battery electric, 1/3 plug-in hybrid. So some of the trends in the industry that we're seeing, I think it's important to share this context as a bit of an explanation for why there's so much attention being paid to these vehicles right now. So there is increasing vehicle availability across the country, but also particularly in Colorado. Part of that is because of the passage in 2019 of the zero emission vehicle standard, which required that automakers provide a certain percentage of the vehicles that they sell in the state of Colorado that they be zero emission options. And what this does is that it makes the automakers bring these vehicles available for sale, whereas otherwise it might be, from their perspective, easier to sell all of their zero emission vehicles on the coasts or in California. So this is a requirement that's placed on the manufacturers. It's not placed on the buyers. Nobody is forced to buy an electric vehicle, but we have to make sure that the models are available for sale in the state for those that want them. And of course, one of the things that we're seeing in recent years and that we expect to pick up in the coming years is a growth in the number of plug-in hybrid and battery electric pickup trucks, SUVs, crossovers, and other types of vehicles that are particularly popular among Colorado drivers. So we feel that we're going to see more variety of vehicles, and that this will encourage more adoption by Coloradans who see these vehicles fitting their lifestyle. This chart is another indication of that same trend. You can see the dark red is battery electric, the blue is hybrid electric, and the gold or yellow color is hydrogen, which is not really a factor yet in the state of Colorado. But you can see over the years, both the number and variety of makes and models that are available to consumers across the country is growing, and we do expect that pattern to continue. At the same time as the variety of the vehicle makes and models, we're also seeing an increase in the range of the vehicles over time. And you can imagine that this is a very important factor in terms of who considers an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid as an option for their lifestyle, especially in more rural areas. But really anybody that is thinking about that, once or twice a year trip up to the national parks in Wyoming or whatever it may be across Colorado for work, for business. Having that maximum range, even if in a typical day, most drivers don't use that, knowing that it's there is something that consumers really care about. And so as the maximum and the median range of vehicles increases over time, it becomes more feasible for more people to make this choice if they're interested in it. So some of those factors that I just talked about combine to paint a picture of a future in which there are more and more EVs on the road in Colorado. This analysis here was done a few years back by an independent consultant called Navigant, and they looked at different future scenarios for zero emission vehicle adoption in the state of Colorado. I won't go into a lot of details about what those different scenarios, the BAU, the ZEV Plus, and the High, what the distinctions are. Essentially, they are different levels of state investment, state support for the market. But you can see that in the highest scenario, the maximum scenario of what they felt was possible is that by 2030, there would be over 1 million of these vehicles on the road in the state of Colorado. And I'll remind you that we started with 40,000 today. So that is a very significant increase. But we do have indications from the market, both in the state level and the national level, that that is achievable. One of the reasons we feel that's achievable is because you see these automaker commitments, especially in the last year or so, we've seen a lot of these announcements. So the Ford F-150 Lightning, that's an battery electric pickup truck, going on sale next year. They're reporting over 100,000 pre-orders so far. Toyota has pledged to have 60 new hybrid, electric, and hydrogen models available by 2025. You can see some of the others, read for yourself. I think the big one is the second to last, that GM, General Motors, has pledged that they will be 100% electric by 2035. And so when you see a company like GM that really thinks in decades rather than months or news cycles, making a pitch like that is what they see as the future, it really does, I think, send a message to the state and other government officials that this is a serious thing that we need to be prepared for and we need to think about. So turning now, providing that context there, turning now to some of the grant programs and the state support that are currently available statewide and including to the governments and members of the PPACG. The Charge Ahead Colorado grant program has been around for about 8 years at this point. This is jointly administered by our colleagues over at the Colorado Energy Office and the Regional Air Quality Council. It is a statewide program, even though the RAC is involved. The RAC tends to focus on the Denver and North Front Range metros, but in this case, this is a statewide program. And you can see that this is focused on charging, EV charging. Now, at a very high level, there are 2 types of EV charging. There's level 2, which is the slower version that typically you might see at a workplace. You might see this at an apartment complex or a public building. And those chargers can fill a vehicle from roughly empty to roughly full over the course of about 6 to 8 hours. So that's not practical, obviously, when you're running around town, but it does actually make a lot of sense if you are charging overnight, if you are charging over the course of a workday, things like that. Fleet charging, this often makes a lot of sense. So there's up to $9,000 available per unit there, available to all sorts of different types of agencies. We see a mix of local governments, nonprofits, housing, private companies, etc., workplace. And then there's also the second type of charging, which is broadly defined as DC fast charging. Now, it is a little confusing because there's different speeds within that DC fast charging. But what you need to know generally is that DC fast charging is faster. How fast depends on the speed and the vehicle accepting the charge. The fastest DC fast charging, could charge a vehicle in about 10 minutes, but that's a very high end and rare version to see right now. I think typically we talk about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the type of vehicle and the speed of the charger. This is a little bit more in line with a retail model that you would expect with gasoline stations, although still, a lot of progress in the technology needed to get to that level. But you can see there that $35,000 per 50 kilowatt DC fast charger is available, up to $50,000 per 150 kilowatt DC fast charger. And so most of this program is focused on those level 2s that I talked about. And there's been over 1,300 of those grants across the state to date. One thing about this program important to note, this is driven by demand. So there are multiple rounds per year, usually 3 rounds per year. And the applicants sort of drive the project locations. The people that are interested in the charging are the ones that come in. They say, this is my location. And then the committee awards or doesn't award based on the quality of the project. That is distinct from, that is distinct from some of the other programs that I'll talk about in a little bit. I want to talk briefly about scenic and historic byways electrification. This is sort of under the umbrella of that Charge Ahead Colorado program I just mentioned, but it is a growing focus area for a few reasons. As you can see, there are 26 scenic and historic byways in the state of Colorado. They're not evenly distributed, but they are all over the state to some extent or another. And these highways tend to fill in some of the gaps between the major travel corridors of the state, between the interstates, between the major US highways. And they also encompass a lot of smaller towns, recreational destinations, tourist destinations. And so by putting EV charging in these areas, it accomplishes a couple of goals. One, it is a rural economic development tool to attract visitors. If you recall that most of the registrations currently in the state are in the metro areas, this is one way to make travel to those rural destinations possible for people in the metro, which is good for the local economies, of course. It also makes it more feasible for Coloradans to consider EV adoption if they know that they can visit their favorite destinations for recreation and tourism when they want to. The other thing that's good about it is that it builds this charging in the more rural areas, in the areas that are less likely to see private investment in the short term, which then allows people in those areas, if they want, to investigate EVs as a potential for their own lifestyle locally, without having to take that plunge before there's a network of charging in their areas. So this is an effort that we've been working actually very much with our usual partners, but as well as the Colorado Tourism Office, because a big element of this is promoting these byways once there is sufficient charging, promoting them as EV friendly, and not just promoting them internally, but as you can see, the Colorado Tourism Office has been successful in attracting coverage from the New York Times, Afar Magazine, and others to make this really a national model that if you are a person from anywhere in the country and you want to participate in low impact or green tourism, that this is an option for you in Colorado.
Hey, Michael, before you move on to the other things, will that grant program, both the scenic, historic, as well as the other, will that cover the entire cost of the charging, or is it like an 80-20 match?
Great question, John. Yes, all of these programs require a match. And I should also point out that when I talk about charging supported by the state of Colorado, the state does not own or operate any of this charging apart from the charging at our own facilities for our own state fleet. So the model for all of these grant programs that I've talked about and will talk about is that there is a public-private partnership. There is a site host, which may be a local government, maybe a private company, and that there is sort of skin in the game on both ends, so that we're not funding projects where the applicants or the hosts have no commitment or don't understand what they're getting into. So there is typically an 80-20% cost match, and it varies a little bit depending on what type of grant program we're talking about, because we do have different funding sources. I hope that answered the question. I'm happy to follow up. I did just want to highlight, I know that the Pikes Peak area might not have a scenic byway exactly within your territory, but there are 2 in the vicinity. So just putting this in the context of the local interest in this potential option. And of course, it's not just scenic byways. We are trying to encourage all sorts of tourism, recreational travel with EVs, because we think that's good for the market, and it's also good for Coloradans to be able to access their destinations. There is a partnership I won't actually mention in most of this presentation, but Colorado Parks and Wildlife earlier this year announced that they are working with a private company called Rivian to put EV charging in all of the state parks. So that's another example of making it possible for EV users to access all the outdoor destinations that people love in Colorado. So another grant program, and this one I would contrast with Charge Ahead Colorado. I mentioned that Charge Ahead Colorado is largely driven by the demand of the applicants, people that are interested in hosting a site and feel that they have a good project to offer and would like the grant support. The DC Fast Charging Corridor Grant was a sort of a different approach to that same need, which is that the state of Colorado, through the Colorado Energy Office, put out a bid and identified 34 locations on the state highway network that we considered key to building a truly statewide travel network that didn't leave any section of the state out. And so in exchange for bidding on those locations, private companies could say, we can do this project for this amount of money and we'll accept the grant support, but they have to make sure that they're deploying these in the areas that the state feels are priorities. So you can see that there was a $10.33 million grant award made. It was a combination of different funding types. CMAQ is a federal fund. Volkswagen settlement was a one-time settlement with that auto manufacturer. And there were some other private matches, as John referenced earlier. So these locations are starting to open across the state. The photo there is in Fairplay, actually. And there's 2 to 4 chargers per site, depending on the anticipated demand. There's a minimum of 50 kilowatts up to 150 kilowatts. One of the important things was that these were designed to be modular so that they could expand in the future with growing demand when appropriate. And because this is a consistent network that was awarded, in this case, to ChargePoint, one of the national charging companies, there is a consistency in the design, a consistency in the payment structure, all of those things that we think is going to make it easier for people that are new to this world to plug in, understand what's going on, and get on their way and keep traveling. A lot of the site hosts are retail locations, grocery stores, in some cases, local governments. And so you see companies like Target, Walmart, Come and Go, REI are some examples of companies that have partnered in this program and in other programs because they see a benefit not just in selling the electricity, which is unlikely to turn a profit in the short term, but in attracting customers to their property who then spend money elsewhere, in the Target, in the Walmart, what have you. So this map shows both the 34 locations that I just referenced. Those are shown in red dots. And then the green are the locations of existing DC fast charging in the state. And what hopefully you can see just visually is that the state has targeted this program to fill in the gaps on that existing privately or publicly supported network. Actually, I should say that not all of the 34 locations in here are in red because some of them have actually gone live at this point. So for instance, up in the Northwest, the station there in Dinosaur that was funded through this program. We had the one in Fairplay that I showed you, which shows green on here. And this map is actually out of date already because I know that we updated this in March. And since then we've had openings in Craig, Granby, Durango, and La Junta. There may be others that I'm missing. But you can really see the shape of a statewide network forming here. This is a similar map just showing existing DC fast chargers. This does not include the grant supported ones. So you can see that the current network is much more sparse than what we're aiming for. And then this, again, I thought it would be helpful to zoom in on the Colorado Springs metro area just to get a sense of where the fast charging in your neighborhood currently is located. One more grant program I want to talk about is DC fast charging grant program for plazas. And so this is a little bit different from that highway corridor oriented charging that I just talked about. This is more focused on central urban areas, places with high density housing, commercial development, maybe a venue, a concert venue, a train station, an airport, where there's a lot of TNC, transportation network companies, and taxi activity, Ubers, Lyfts, taxis. Those fleets have very high mileage, and so it's a priority to help electrify them. But we also know that we need to provide charging for that to be feasible for their businesses to be efficient and keep picking up passengers. So this is a newer program. It is focused on those areas, and there is a third round of this program coming up in the fall that I think potentially some communities in the Pikes Peak area might be interested in looking at. I'll also mention the Volkswagen settlement. This was a one-time settlement with between the US EPA, the state of California, and the Volkswagen Corporation. Each state in the union got a portion of the settlement funding. In Colorado, we had 68.7 million. You can see the breakdown of how the state of Colorado allocated those funds. So the orange is truck and bus replacements, shuttle buses, private buses, as well as medium and heavy duty trucks. The gray portion is transit buses. And then there's ZEV equipment, which is charging, admin costs, and DERO, which is like an off-road equipment type program. This is a joint effort. The part of it that CDOT is responsible for is the transit buses. One of the things about Volkswagen that's unique is that you do have to scrap a vehicle. You have to take an existing diesel vehicle off of the road in order to replace that with a zero emission option. You know, there's a grant level that is based on the incremental cost of the bus. It includes charging. And this is a program that a lot of transit agencies in the state have taken advantage of, including Mountain Metropolitan Transit in Colorado Springs. They were one of our year one awardees for, I believe, 2 electric buses plus charging. We've had 3 years of the program now, and we're currently in the 4th call for applications. So if there are any transit agencies in the area that are interested in that, those applications will close on September 3rd, and I'm happy to walk anyone through the application process. So with all of that, I now turn to the new enterprises. As I think many people are aware, SB 21260 passed earlier this year. It's a very large bill. It has many elements that I will not touch on today, but for the sake of this conversation, we have 3 new enterprises that relate to electric vehicle charging in one form or another. The first on the left there is the Community Access Enterprise. This will be managed by the Colorado Energy Office. And this is to build EV charging in communities across the state. There's other program eligibilities written into the bill, which are to support EV and e-bike adoption in low and moderate income communities. And there are other elements that could be included in that broadly defined charging in communities bucket of programs. And you can see that there's $310 million anticipated over the 10-year life of this program. The second is the Fleet Electrification or Clean Fleet Enterprise. This will be managed by our colleagues at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, CDPACG. This will focus on supporting the replacement of fleet vehicles, be they delivery trucks, commercial delivery trucks, transportation network companies, school buses, other light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. Basically getting the older, oftentimes dirtier diesel and gasoline vehicles off the road, replacing them with zero emission vehicles when there is a vehicle that meets that current need. And you can see that there's $289 million anticipated over the life of this 10-year program. And then finally, the one that I am most closely connected to myself is the public transit electrification, the Clean Transit Enterprise. This would be a similar continuation of the Volkswagen settlement program with some differences in terms of eligibility and requirements. And this would have a $134 million investment over 10 years. In all of these cases, when there are vehicle replacements, there's always eligibility for the charging infrastructure or fueling infrastructure needed to support those. And there's some other things in there like facility retrofits and workforce development and other training things that are not directly part of the vehicle replacement, but that are necessary to make that effective and to make that transition smooth. And so the bill has rather broad eligibilities in terms of what these enterprises can fund or should focus on. But in all cases, there will be a board that is formed for each of these enterprises, and they will make the ultimate determinations about the amounts of money to allocate to different sub-programs, criteria, eligibility, award selection, things like that. So right now we are in the process of seeking membership in those boards. There is an application form. If you follow that link, there is a survey that you basically explain your interest. And then it's important to note it's a 2-step process. You fill out that survey. At the end of the survey, there is a link to fill out the official application. So please, if you're interested, make sure that you do both parts of that. And you can see that the bill asks us to particularly focus on board members who represent disproportionately impacted communities, the automobile industry, businesses or organizations that are involved in the EV space. And of course, there is also room for general interest and geographic representation from across the state. oops, let me see if I can advance the slide here. Oh boy, I was doing good right until the end. There we go. So I know that I ran through that very quickly. I apologize for how quickly I had to go over some of those programs. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also happy to follow up individually with anyone that would like to send me an email. You can see my contact there. And I'll just leave you with these photos of two of CDOT's battery electric vehicle there on the left side, the Chevy Bolt, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. That's a Ford Fusion on the right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Just want to make sure I reiterate, can you send us those slides? Because there's a lot of links in there that we
Yes.
want to get into everybody. With that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I do have several questions, but before I do that, I'd like to open the floor if anybody else has questions. Yes, please, Sharon.
I have a quick question. Have you found that the outside temperature affects the battery charging ability and its ability to how fast it charges or its ability to hold that charge? I'm just thinking of some of these long winter nights that we get here. Somebody's trying to charge their car and it's pretty run down. They get up the next morning, it still isn't really charged. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. So I'm just asking.
Yes, there is certainly a temperature effect on batteries in general, and we see that in electric vehicles. So some of the ways to mitigate that currently, for instance, in the transit world, is that we recommend that agencies that have the ability to store vehicles indoors, that you prioritize the electric vehicles indoors. Currently, a lot of EV owners have access to their own garage and do most of their charging in a garage. So that's certainly helpful. This is a true limitation of EVs in the current availability, but it is something that we've seen improve over time with the technology. So at the moment, it's something that you can mitigate as a fleet owner or as an individual. But in the long term, we expect that the technology will continue to develop and improve on that front, as well as some others.
Okay, other questions? All right, thank you.
There's the-
Michael, oh, I'm sorry, I've got a few, my apologies. And some of them are going to be tough questions you might not have an answer for, but let me just go through them. The first one's, I think, fairly straightforward. What is the business model for kind of the long-term sustainability of these electric charging stations? And I'll tell you why I asked the question, because there's several that are offering the charging station for free. And if that continues through public agencies, you'll crowd out the companies that might want to try to install these around the country. So what's the model for charging versus not charging the electricity for the use of these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there are two ways of viewing the electricity cost element here. And it's obviously confusing because we're using the word charge in two different meanings here. So typically what we've seen is a lot of level 2 hosts, site hosts, do not charge for electricity because they view it as an amenity rather than a revenue source, or as an employee perk in the case of a workplace, or as a resident perk in the case of an apartment building, right? In terms of the fast charging, that tends to be more expensive to operate for the site host. And so they often want to at least even out or even turn a small profit on the electric vehicle, on the sale of electricity. Now, the state of Colorado, we have sort of best practices that we encourage grantees to use in terms of how they set those prices so that they're both fair but also sustainable over time. But as I emphasized before, the state of Colorado does not own or operate these locations apart from our own facilities. And so we really do leave it up to the site host to make that determination. A lot of the larger companies like Target, like Come and Go, they see this as a way to attract customers, a sort of a loss leader in a sense, who will then spend their money elsewhere on products and services at the site. But to be honest, there isn't enough data yet because there aren't enough EVs yet to know what that market looks like long term, whether people will actually be making a sustainable profit on the sale of electricity, or whether it will be a very low or no margin offering that is offset elsewhere in the business.
Okay, thank you. And for the record, I support greater placement of these devices around the state, but that doesn't mean I don't have some questions that might sound a little critical, but let me go through them.
No, that's healthy. I
Yeah.
always encourage that. Thank you.
So, right now the batteries that the predominant use, the predominant number of batteries, actually it's all of them at the moment, use cobalt. And 60% of the cobalt is mined from the Democratic Republic of Congo, which uses child slave labor to mine the cobalt. So there's a lot of research ongoing right now to convert cobalt batteries to lithium nickelate and other types of lithium alloys. Lithium nickelate seems to be the most promising at the moment. And there's a lot of money. There's hundreds of millions of dollars going into the research for alternatives to cobalt batteries to get rid of some of these other challenges. So the next question is, for these charging stations, I think the answer is no, but I want to ask, do these charging stations have challenges charging a wide variety of different types of batteries? So if when the industry, this is inevitable, it's going to convert from cobalt batteries to lithium nickelate batteries. Are the products that we're intending on buying through this program going to have challenges with lithium nickelate?
Yeah, that is a great question. As the supply chain changes, will that affect the infrastructure already in the ground? I am not aware of any difference in terms of the charger and the type of battery that it is charging. So I believe the answer to your question is no, but that is a question that I would probably want to follow up with some of our experts over at the National Renewable Energy Lab in terms of what are the longer term implications. If the makeup of the batteries change, does our approach to charging need to change as a state and as a country?
Yeah, I'd be interested in getting up a follow-up answer to that. I don't know the answer either, but these fast charging stations pump a lot of juice into those batteries, and some chemical properties of some batteries can accommodate that fast charge, and others actually degrade faster with the fast charge. I'd be interested in knowing if lithium nickelate and some of these others can accommodate that. Maybe, for all I know, they might even be better than cobalt batteries. Next question I have for you is, as we go to huge increases in productions of these kinds of cars, which is, what this particular legislation is intending on doing, that's going to be an enormous number of batteries, and the batteries do not last a long time. Hopefully they'll get better, but right now they're lasting maybe 10 to 20 years. But China makes most of those batteries. In fact, I just looked it up. It's hard to really get a good read on it, but about 3/4 of all the batteries used in electric vehicles around the world are made in China. And they have, the other statistic I saw is they have 93 mega factories that make giant volumes of batteries. And the United States has only 4 of those, to give you an example of the comparison between the US and China. And China uses coal to fire those plants. China uses almost exclusively coal to run their industries. So I'd be interested in knowing if anybody has any concerns about using Chinese batteries that use coal to produce the batteries.
Yes, certainly. This is a question that we get in a slightly different form quite a bit, which is the sort of the life cycle emissions cost of EVs versus what we call tailpipe, so it's easy to say that a vehicle is zero emission from the tailpipe, but how did you produce that vehicle? What went into it? What was the power source? So there have been multiple studies related to that very question of, are EVs actually more sustainable over the life cycle? And most of those studies to date have shown that even with the coal that you are referring to producing the vehicle tending to be higher because of the location of the manufacturer, et cetera, that over the life cycle of the vehicle, there is still a emission savings with an electric vehicle compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle. Now, one of the things that is unique about EVs, and that could be an opportunity if it is followed through on, is that they can also become greener over time as those energy sources change. So for instance, in the United States, if you are charging your EV and today the mix is say 60% coal, 40% renewable, that may be different in 5 years. So your electricity may be greener 5 years from now than it is today. There's no guarantee of that, but we do see that trend happening in the utility world. Likewise, you've mentioned two different issues in terms of supply chains from countries that are either have human rights issues or have environmental issues. And those are things that ideally are changing over time at the same time that the vehicles are on the road. But it goes without saying that the state of Colorado has relatively little influence on the energy mix in China or the labor practices in the DRC. So, these are tough challenges. I think that from an environmental standpoint, EVs are still shown by multiple studies to be cleaner than internal combustion engines over that life cycle. But there is a lot of opportunity, so to speak, to make that better moving forward. And I think that the automakers are recognizing that that's what the public wants and are trying to catch up with that in terms of where and how they manufacture their products.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I recognize, to your point, there's not a lot that Colorado can do about this particular topic, but I'd say that there are some things that Colorado can do with regard to this topic, right? Mm-hmm. We can encourage the use of American manufactured batteries because I promise you 100% guarantee they are cleaner as far as GMG in their production. And we should maybe be trying to produce that demand signal to encourage more plants to be manufactured in the United States. I think not only just because of the pollution component of it, but because of many, many other issues with China that we now have. And we should not, and I'll repeat this, we should not be relying on China for initiatives like this. But right now we are. So I think, the state can maybe get a little aggressive or maybe get a little public about wanting U.S. industry to grow in the battery production arena. And, I don't know that we can do much more than statements and so forth, but I think it's worthwhile to consider that.
Yes.
And then the one last point I make, I know I hear it all the time. It drives me nuts. And again, I apologize for this comment, but everybody was running around calling these zero emission vehicles, and they are not. They consume electricity, and the electricity produces emissions. They are not zero emission vehicles. So I just wish people would use the term low emission vehicles or something like that instead of zero emission, because zero is not true. Thanks.
Yes, I certainly sympathize with that comment, and I mentioned before the distinction between tailpipe emissions versus life cycle emissions, and I fully agree that that is confusing and can be misleading. So I do try to make it clear that no vehicle is zero emissions, but that we are focused on the vehicle, since that is the part of the equation that the state, or specifically CDOT, but the state in general, has the most influence over. But I totally agree. For these vehicles to reach their full promise from a sustainability standpoint, as well as the other, supply chain and national competitiveness issues that you raised, they need to be coupled with clean generation of energy, which we are seeing in the state of Colorado and across the country, a growing share of renewables. But they're not there yet. That is a future state that we are aiming for, as opposed to the current reality.
Thank you, Michael, for taking my tough questions. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hey, Michael, we want to keep an eye on the time, but we did have Councilmember Zaluga on the line that wanted to ask a question, and then maybe we can wrap it up and move on with our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, my questions follow along in that regard. First is, what consideration has been given by the state to the unintended consequences of dependence on China for battery production versus the model of self-reliance that we've been moving towards in terms of fuel for a nation? I think that I'm addressing that from a security question.
Yeah, again, I think we certainly recognize that we would prefer as a state for the components of these vehicles, the vehicles themselves, to be American made, American sourced. That is not the reality today. I believe that, and I'm probably overstepping my knowledge here, but the senators' offices might be able to speak to the fact that there was a bill passed earlier this year on a very bipartisan nature related to competition with China and sort of winning some of those technological battles in the future. So yes, I mean, I think it's something that we acknowledge that right now the technology, for a variety of economic reasons, has been, in many cases, the batteries themselves in particular have been coming out of China. But we are seeing now with GM and the other major American auto manufacturers, as well as German and Japanese companies, a greater commitment to owning this future and to competing with it rather than ceding it to certain other countries. So I do think that it's a challenge. It's one that I believe our national leaders are concerned about and focused on. And it's something that I think the state of Colorado, with particularly with the National Renewable Energy Lab, but also with a number of startup companies that we've seen, is really trying to do our part to advance American leadership and American manufacturing through our grant programs, but also just for the industry writ large.
Well, I hope that's the case, but what concerns me is that it's a bit of the cart before the horse, that we are currently making decisions on a state level to move us in the direction that is putting us with a fuel dependency and a supplier dependency on China. And the second, so that's my concern, is we're going ahead of the cart here. And are we okay to allow that sort of vulnerability into our infrastructure without putting in place and intentionally putting in place the sort of infrastructure that guards it to be something that we can control within our own borders? And the second part, so that's my question. I just pose it. It's like, you know, we're moving kind of fast with this desire to think that a zero emissions, which I totally agree with, it's not zero, but we have environmental pollution consequences for the dead batteries. What are we intending to do with the volume of dead batteries that we accumulate in terms of the recycling or inability to recycle some of that?
Yeah, that another great question. And in the interest of time, I'll just keep it brief to say that there are currently some second life applications. So not recycling of the battery, but a secondary use of the battery for power backup in facilities or in individual homes. So that's one option in the short term. In the longer term, there is quite a bit of research, both by national labs like NREL, but also among the automakers themselves and the battery companies, to design the batteries on the front end to be recyclable. So it is technologically possible to do that. What is lacking right now is it's not yet profitable or economically sustainable to recycle those batteries. So by designing them on the front end to be recycled at the end of life, they can bring that cost down, make it easier, and create an actual business out of that. So that is something we anticipate in the future, but you're absolutely correct that it doesn't exist today. Today, the best option is to use those batteries, which are no longer suitable for transportation purposes, but can supply useful energy backup and energy storage in other contexts.
Thank you for taking my questions and considering my concerns.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John and Andy, for inviting me today. And I'll just emphasize again, happy at all times to answer questions via email or schedule a time one-on-one with any of the members if they'd like to discuss any of these issues further.
Thanks, Michael. We did have one more question in the room from Sharon, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, this is Sharon Thompson. It's more of a comment to maybe us as PPACG members. Maybe we enter the table at the legislative discussion next year when they are talking about meeting these certain levels, and we start sending up amendments and comments that we think a certain percentage of these vehicles being obtained by the state should be purchased with American-made batteries. And it may not happen, but at least we're sending the message that, you know, we need to have our dependency, you know, on things that are local rather than overseas, because I think we're all seeing with the chip shortage right now, waiting to get even your washing machine fixed because you can't get the part for your washing machine, computer part for it. I think maybe that's where we enter it at the legislative level and just saying, look, yes, we understand you want to be switching this certain percent. This is a train, the track we're on, but we think a certain percentage of it needs to be local, and that needs to be included in these bills. And that's where the pressure is going to start coming from.
And just to
locally.
finish that comment up, I appreciate that. And it's something we should have a conversation about in PPACG. And again, to my point, I've got no objection to electric vehicles and charging stations, but we are running pell-mell down a path that increases our dependence on China, that uses coal to make those batteries. And we don't have the technologies to replace the current cobalt batteries with lithium nickelate batteries is not complete. That research is actually ongoing right now. And so every electric vehicle that has cobalt in its cathode has some cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo that used slave child labor to get the cobalt. So this kind of begs the question, should we run super fast on this, or should we throttle it a little bit to make sure some of these other technologies are actually in place? And then the last one is about making sure we can make it in the US. Thank you. I think it is time we have to move on. So.
So thanks again, Michael. And again, if one last reminder, if you could send me your slides, so Jess can send it out with the recording. And again, we look forward to working with you on this, especially since there will be opportunities. You had mentioned that CDOT sort of put together one for 34 different sites. So I know I have some jurisdictions that would be interested in being the next time something gets packaged, as well as the process by which if they have something standalone in their jurisdiction, that they can make an application to get that funded, both transit electrification like MMT, as well as charging stations. So we look forward to working with you, Michael, and thanks again for the great presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Spencer, so you've only got about 3 minutes. No, I think what we're going to go ahead and do is we'll push back our other presentation that Andy and I were going to do. So I just wanted to let you know up front, Spencer, time is not an issue. You still have your full allotment of time, and we'll make it up elsewhere. So you're not off the hook. You don't get to hang up in 3 minutes. So with that, Spencer, we'll hand it over to you.
I can try to get it done in 3 minutes, but I'm not sure if that's fair to everybody on the call here.
I don't think this group's going to let you go in 3 minutes.
I would be disappointed if they did. Okay, I've got my slides pulled up on my screen. Can you guys see them on your end?
Yes, we can.
Good deal. All righty. Well, thank you for having me this morning. I do greatly appreciate it. My name is Spencer Dodge. I'm the liaison with the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission. I've been working on this project for a little bit over 2 years now. And we're at the Front Range Passenger Rail team and the Southwest Chief team are at a good position right now, both project-wise and programmatically, to kind of give you all an update this summer. So that's what we're here doing today. I want to give you guys some rundowns of what we've gotten done to date over the last couple of years, some accomplishments on the project side, as well as kind of where we're going over the next couple of years. Give you an update on Senate Bill 238, which is the creation of the Front Range Passenger Rail District that was passed this past session. Again, give you kind of a project development update, and then discuss Amtrak's future plans for just a short minute. So I'll move quickly through these slides, as I know we want to get to kind of a Q&A portion of this discussion. But real briefly, in January, the Rail Commission published a preliminary alternatives analysis that included items like a long-term vision that we developed over the course of about a year with stakeholder engagement input, a very high-level environmental review, ridership modeling, very high-level conceptually, cost estimations and engineering designs, funding and finance analysis, and also, like I mentioned, a pretty robust stakeholder engagement process that I think I have a slide later on that I can outline for you guys. So that's what we've done to date. Looking ahead for this year and next year, we've got a couple of different things working here. Currently, we have a Southwest Chief through-car alternatives analysis, and what that's really looking at is how we can get passenger rail service via the Southwest Chief line that runs through La Junta and Trinidad. How can we get those trains running up to Pueblo and potentially Colorado Springs as well? So kind of that very first step as far as initiating passenger rail service north to south along the Front Range. That effort is partially funded through an FRA Chrissy grant. And so, we have some local matches from Pueblo County and some of the smaller communities, and then the federal government is also weighing in on that as well. So that's very helpful. And additionally, we have another Federal Railroad Administration grant that is helping us to develop a further service development plan and also do some rail simulation modeling for the Front Range Passenger Rail project as well. We are working on getting that project started and underway, just kind of finalizing some details with the Federal Railroad Administration now. On the programmatic and policy side of things, the Rail Commission is now transitioning to a Front Range Passenger Rail District with the passage of Senate Bill 238. And so over the course of this summer, we're kind of wrapping up all of the work that the Rail Commission has done, putting a nice bow on it so that we can really leave the future board of directors in a good position to kind of hit the ground running and continue the project without losing much momentum at all. And finally, we're really working hard with as many different partners as we possibly can, both local, state, and federal, particularly with Amtrak. They've got pots of money now, particularly with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill to the Senate. They've got a lot of potential here, as well as some of our local transit partners like RTD. So really kind of figuring out how we can make all of these different transportation systems complementary to each other and kind of build upon the work of our partners. So Senate Bill 238, again, this is the creation of the Front Range Passenger Rail District. The way I've kind of been describing this is it's an evolution of the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission, provides a little more teeth to the work that they've been doing. So, generally speaking, the powers that be are, kind of financing and designing, constructing, operating, and maintaining a passenger rail system. The bill also lays out kind of the boundaries that the district's going to fall under, as well as the board of directors. And then the bill also has several checks and balances and transparency measures that will really make this a project that I think a lot of people can get behind. So looking out into the next probably 6-9 months, going through a process right now of gathering appointees for some of the different members. The MPOs and the COGs, your appointees need to be selected by March 1st. The governor's appointees will be April 1st. And then the Front Range Passenger Rail Board, the new board, they need to meet before the 15th of May. So it's coming up very quickly. And then the remaining funds from the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission's Fund Center, those will be transferred over to the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And through Senate Bill 260 in February, the Rail Commission will get about $2.5 million. And so that money will be transferred over to the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And they'll be able to kind of hit the ground running with some funding in place. Other couple of milestones, and this is laid out in the bill, is before a ballot measure can be recommended, and I'll go into this a little bit more, a service development plan and an operating plan and a financial plan, 3 separate components, do need to be published first before a ballot can be recommended for an election. Looking at the boundaries, again, these are the MPO and the COG boundaries, generally speaking. For areas that are not located within those boundaries, there's a 5-mile kind of border around I-25 where we can kind of encapsulate the rest of that corridor. Won't spend a ton of time on this slide. You can see the map here. And I do apologize. For some reason, this map keeps losing quality as I save it. So I need to get that worked out and maybe get a new map. But I'm happy to send this over to anybody who'd like to take a closer look. And while I think about that, I will send these slides, John, over to you once we're done here. I made a couple last-minute edits this morning, so I wasn't able to send it real quick. But I will make sure to get this into anybody who wants them in hands. So the board composition, it's a 17-person board. And again, these all need to be referred before the first meeting. The governor gets 6 appointees. One of those does need to be a resident of a county, city and county, or municipality, whatever it may be, of an area where a lighter commuter rail service was planned as part of the fast tracks of RTD. That is more related to the Denver metro area. But additionally, some of these governor's appointees need to have experience or at least expertise of some sort in transportation and public finance, supporting a statewide employee organization, passenger rail system development, and operations or environmental conservation as well. So it's the governor's appointees. From the MPOs and the COGs that are represented, and again, that's Dr. COG, Pikes Peak, North Front Range, Pueblo area, and South Central. DRCOG is going to get 4 representatives, being over $1.5 million. Both PPACG and NFR&PO, you guys each get 2. And one particular note here that I'll make, because it does apply to Colorado Springs, as they have 55% or more of the total population of PPACG's territory, the city of Colorado Springs does get to appoint one of their own representatives. And then finally, PACOG gets 1 and South Central COG gets 1 as well. And rounding out that list of 17, CDOT's executive director also gets to appoint one director to the new board. Additionally, similar to the Rail Commission and its current makeup, the 2 Class 1s, BNSF Railway and Union Pacific, they will have a non-voting member on the board. Amtrak and RTD also will have non-voting members. The I-70 Mountain Corridor Coalition will have a non-voting member. And then finally, if they so choose, the governors of both Wyoming and New Mexico can appoint 1 member each as non-voting members in kind of an advisory capacity. So making sure we're including our neighbors to the north and the south as we move this project along.
My apologies, just a quick interruption.
Yes,
Yeah, on the last chart, you don't need to go back to it, but we're having this conversation about Southwest Chief through car. And I just want to find out, is Southwest Chief Amtrak? Okay. Just want to,
Yeah,
so can we assume
Amtrak's
when we
long
see the
distance
Amtrak bullet, it's probably going to be Southwest Chief? Okay, thank you.
Generally, yes. They also all note the California Zephyr is another long distance line that runs through the state of Colorado. And so, they have other interests involved as well. And particularly, and I'll mention this later on, I've got a slide. When Amtrak when they're looking at their future plans for 2035 and beyond, they're strongly considering the Front Range Passenger Rail Corridor as a state-supported service, as that does kind of connect 2 of their long-distance lines that cut across the middle of America that have no connections north to south anywhere between Chicago and California. So, they're interested in creating some new city pairs, connecting more rural areas to a growing population center like the Front Range of Colorado. So I'll discuss Amtrak's involvement a little bit more, but yes, generally speaking, it's fair to assume that Amtrak's involvement is very Southwest Chief focused. So to keep moving on, in Senate Bill 238, it does lay out specific powers. Again, these are kind of these added teeth to the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission's work so far. Of course, subject to the approval of the voters of the district as a whole, not county by county, as a whole, the voters. The board does have the ability to run a sales and use tax ballot initiative subject to the approval of the voters. And also additionally, I'll mention that 2/3 of the board need to vote to approve a sales and use tax levy. And so, really need to have support from up and down the corridor there. A couple of other items here. The new board does have the ability to create stationary improvement districts that, of course, based on approval of the owners and the voters, would have the ability to levy additional sales and use tax for that property to kind of cover costs of station design, operation, maintenance, and any subsequent areas around that. Also, the ability to enter into any public-private partnerships, be that Amtrak or another state operator or whoever it may be, just kind of giving the ability to leverage some of those PPPs that have worked throughout the country. And then finally, the ability to employ personnel, contract with public and private entities for operating and maintaining a passenger rail system. The slide says checks and balances, but I think maybe transparency is another word that I might throw up there as well. So I mentioned before submitting a question to any ballot to establish any district tax, there's a couple of different steps that need to be checked off. The first being 3 items here: a service development plan, an operating plan, and a detailed financing plan. That needs to be published. We are starting on the service development plan, doing our best to get that work started as quickly as possible, so we can kind of maintain the momentum that we've built over the last few years, leave the board of directors in a great place. That service development plan does need to identify the route and the phasing as far as construction and operation goes that would be funded by a tax. The financing plan needs to identify committed and potential federal partners financial partners, both federal, state, or local, whoever that may be. That could include RTD, that could include Amtrak, other various elements of the federal government, or private partners, if that's the case. And again, I think I mentioned this in the last slide. To approve the submission of the ballot initiative, it's got to be an affirmative vote of 2/3. So not just a simple majority, but 2/3 of all voting directors on the board. So we really want to make sure we've got at least agreement, maybe not consensus, but at least agreement before we run that to voters. Looking ahead, so this is a slide on transparency. I think this is appropriate word here. As the board of directors or as the new Front Range Passenger Rail Board kind of picks up steam, there's going to be a lot of work done. And so we really want to make sure that we're involving the legislature, our local NPO and COG partners. And so every year the board of directors will publish and present a comprehensive annual report of all activities, financial, project-wise, where's the technical project at the moment. We'll present that yearly to a joint meeting of the Transportation and Local Government Committee in the House of Representatives, as well as the Transportation and Energy Committee in the Senate. Additionally, that comprehensive annual report will be given to each of the MPOs and Council of Governments who appoint board members. So yearly, you guys you'll be hearing from hopefully me more often. And finally, if a tax is eventually approved, the state auditor will then conduct a financial audit on the district once every 2 years. And so really trying to make sure that we're as transparent with the people of Colorado and our elected officials as possible. And finally, just a note, the Front Range Passenger Rail District is, of course, subject to all appropriate open records acts, be that Central Lines or CORA or Federal Information Act. So everything is pretty standard as far as special district boards go here. So that's 238. I don't know if we want to stop and ask questions now or just get through the whole slide presentation. If you do want to ask me a question, by all means, please interrupt me. Doesn't hurt my feelings one bit. But I think the next few questions or the next few slides, will be more project-based. So maybe we can run through those and have your questions answered as we go. Otherwise, please interrupt me.
Yeah, thank you. This is
so
stay in the
moving
chair. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Quick question for you. Something that Sharon and I just chatted about a second ago. There was a chart in there that said something about citizens living within 2 miles of where a station may be placed there would be some kind of group made. I think that we just passed it. Yeah, that there would be an improvement district and that the citizens there would be taxed to build that station with the improvement district.
Yes.
So I'm not the two of us at least are not familiar with that. And why is it if they're trying to find money to build a station, why would it be restricted to 2 miles when maybe an entire community would benefit from it?
That's a great question. I think for some of the larger communities, when you're placing a station area improvement district, I think that for some of the larger communities like Denver or Colorado Springs particularly, you might run into the issue where outlying areas are saying, well, hey, my property values aren't going up because of this station area district. I'm 4 miles away or 5 miles away or whatever it may be. And so they had to place some kind of radius around that. I think nationally, they looked at some of these other station area improvement districts and kind of average this out to about a 2 mile radius generally is where the vast majority of the benefits from a new station will fall. And so I think that was the idea behind placing it as a 2 mile instead of the entire community. To my knowledge, I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but I know that we looked nationally, or at least the bill drafters looked nationally, kind of looked at what other states have done and said, hey, this seems to be working for quite a few different kind of transit agencies.
Thank you, Spencer.
Transportation agencies.
Hang on a second. I think we've got some comments from the room here. Once you get that mic going, please go ahead.
I've forgotten how to use the microphones. Sorry, Commissioner. So one more thing on that. I think you could compare it to kind of like a bid. We have a downtown bid that taxes itself. So any station improvement district would have to vote to agree to tax itself. So it wouldn't be forced upon them, and they would agree to tax themselves to build this station. And as we've seen from Union Station in downtown Denver, the area around the station has definitely improved in all areas. I mean, as far as housing, and there's just a lot of development going on. So we know that the area around any station that we build in downtown Colorado Springs will be improved. So I mean, I think the state really decided that that 2 mile circumference or boundary was probably a really good one for Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is really the city that is going to build a station. I mean, Pueblo will likely also, but so it's really looking to our municipalities for when it comes to that piece of the legislation.
Okay, so just make sure I understand this. If there were something brought forward for an improvement district and the citizens decide to vote against it, that doesn't preclude other sources of funding for the station?
No, it doesn't. It just
Okay.
makes it much more likely that it would occur, that we would be able
Okay.
to build our station.
And is the 2 mile radius statutorily directed from 238, or is it a policy?
It's in the law.
It's in the
So,
law
yeah.
too. Okay, so it's a statute. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else from in the room or online, I suppose, as well? Righty. If not, we'll keep going then. So the next few slides are a little more project-based, a little more technical-based, and just kind of give you an update of where we are and what we're looking at these days. We have developed a front range passenger rail overall vision. This vision was really developed with a lot of stakeholder input, a lot of public involvement processes as well, from all the way down south in Pueblo and Trinidad up to Fort Collins. Really wanted to talk with as many different Coloradans as we could, and try to focus this project as Colorado driven, right? And so safe, efficient, reliable transportation option for travel between major population centers and destinations. As I mentioned, Pueblo to Fort Collins. And the idea is to create a backbone for connections and expanding rail and transit options in the state and region. So really kind of expanding these options that we have to move north and south. As far as alignment goes, for the south segment, this is Castle Rock down to Pueblo. We've kind of focused in on 2 different alignments here, or 3 different alignments really. It's kind of a combination between 2. One of which being the BNSF freight rail alignment, a middle one kind of a combination between BNSF freight rail and I-25, and then a third and final combination of I-25 and E-470. And that E-470 is really up north past Castle Rock. So both of these, or I'm going to call them both, they're generally 2 different alignments when you get to Monument, Colorado Springs, and Fort Carson and Pueblo. So the highway and the freight alignments, we're looking at the same communities for this segment. The ridership along the south segment is higher for the I-25 E-470 alignment. Again, I think that's more focused on Castle Rock up there. When we look at kind of Colorado Springs to Castle Rock or Colorado Springs to Denver, or Pueblo to Colorado Springs, we're seeing very similar ridership amongst all the different alternatives. The fastest speeds along its distance between the communities and the primary station locations, throughout the entire Front Range corridor, we are seeing faster speeds over the longer distances. It gives more time, for these trains to kind of speed up before they have to slow down hitting stations again. A lot of flat open space, which really can kind of be leveraged to pick up speed and cut down on travel times as well. And between the highways and freight alignments, the environmental and community impacts are really similar. Those 2 alignments are quite close to each other for most of the way you can see them from one another. So really looking at the same areas being impacted, same communities being impacted to various degrees. As I mentioned earlier, and I kind of wanted to focus on this again, is stakeholder engagement over the last few years. We've had 4 rounds of stakeholder segment coalitions looking at the whole project. It's a 180-mile corridor, and there's a lot of different contexts for a lot of different communities, from Fort Collins to Boulder, to Denver, to Castle Rock, to Pueblo, to Colorado Springs, wherever it may be. And so we really wanted to focus some of these conversations geographically. And so we had about 90 attendees total for each round over the course of those first 4 rounds of meetings. We were able to get on the ground technical input from staff, from experts at a local level who know their communities best. And then, we also have to have a venue to have kind of comprehensive corridor-wide conversations. And so we also gathered a corridor coalition, which really kind of combines input from all the segments and discusses things at kind of a regional corridor-wide level. Public involvement efforts, many of you have probably seen me or some of my colleagues providing information and presentations and updates to city councils, county commissions, advocacy groups, NPOs, COGs, airports, transit agencies, really any kind of group that you could think of that may be involved or related to Front Range Passenger Rail. We've done our best to stay out in front of you guys and provide you information at relevant points. Additionally, working with many different agencies, working with the Federal Railroad Administration, RTD, the Class 1 railroads, Amtrak, FTA, FHWA, the Highway and Transit Administrations, Army Corps of Engineers, Natural Resources, Division of Wildlife. There's a lot of different entities and agencies that have a vested interest in this. And so really making sure we're staying up to date with them in these early stages of the process so that later on down the road, we've got these relationships built and a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve here. So really trying to keep everybody who needs to be involved, I think is what I'll leave that at. And I actually think this is my last slide. It's kind of an important slide. I really want to highlight Amtrak in their plans and their hopes and dreams for the Front Range Passenger Rail corridor as well. They released, and I believe this was in March, I think, the Amtrak Connects Us vision. This is kind of their long-term vision looking out 10 years, 15 years down the road. And I mentioned earlier, there's the California Zephyr and the Southwest Chief. And I think you guys can see my mouse, but if not, you look at Colorado and you see the new Front Range Passenger Rail corridor that they have highlighted there. And if you look at those two long distance lines, east and west, you'll notice that those don't connect anywhere, but for Illinois and California. And so, looking at the Front Range, it's a more high density corridor than other areas through that gap. And it really provides an option for Amtrak to kind of invest here and create a really high number of new city pairs, providing the ability for folks in more rural areas to get to Colorado Springs, to get to Castle Rock, to get to Denver for healthcare opportunities or education opportunities or whatever it may be. So really connecting a large part of the country, as well as our own region here within the region connecting again. So like Colorado Springs, UCCS, those students can more quickly get up to Boulder or to Denver or wherever it may be. And so providing another transportation option that may not currently exist. So Amtrak, and I want to caveat this with, this was very, very light pencil back in the napkin, just their initial thoughts. They're thinking about 3 daily trips for initial service, Fort Collins to Pueblo. One of those trips going all the way up to Cheyenne. They're thinking about 196,000 riders. And I will caveat that again. Amtrak's ridership models are, the context that they're generally used with is not necessarily the same as the Front Range corridor. Think Northeast, the Northeast corridor, DC, New York, Boston, or California. Densities are a little different. The way people travel and move and work are a little different. So we have some different ridership numbers, but we're working with Amtrak's technical staff to try to true up some of those assumptions and make sure we're all on the same page here. So they're really interested in kind of assisting us in developing this new service north to south. They're a huge partner for us, and we're making sure that we stay connected with them and coordinating as closely as possible. So there will be a non-voting rail, or they are currently a non-voting rail commissioner, and they will be a non-voting member on the future rail district. And they do provide a potential partner as an operator for a state-run service. So I think that's all of all the slides that I have. I'm happy to take questions or field any discussion points that we would like. Don, I'm not sure how you want to handle this, so I will just turn this open to anybody who has anything they'd like to ask.
Yes, does anybody have any questions? Sharon, go ahead.
I just would like to reiterate that you have got to consider the quality of life and equity issues for the communities that have these additional trains going through their communities. GHG, we have all these discussions, as I said last week. We're concerned about that. And if we're going to be sitting on the tracks a lot longer, you need to have a long-term solution for that. I don't know what Monument is like in terms of trains going through their community, if you have overpasses, underpasses, or whatever, but we have one in the entire city of Fountain. And there's a lot of people getting ready to come live on our east border. So it's still a lot of concerns in our areas.
Yeah,
and I know there's a study coming, and I've heard that for a year.
And Spencer, for your benefit, maybe it's obvious to you already, but if any trains stop in Fountain, let's say to pick up or drop off passengers, you basically stop most of the east-west travel in that town because the rail goes through town.
Right,
So,
right.
okay, other
Yeah,
questions?
it's a,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to respond briefly. The Mayor Fountain did send a letter to the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission, and we did respond and offered to be a part of any conversations that you wanted to have there. And I think as we start considering the long-term goals of Front Range Passenger Rail and how it impacts some of our municipalities, especially smaller towns like Mountain, and how we look at infrastructure changes to change some of those grades to not being at grade, and are really conversations that we need to be having to ensure that we're protecting our communities. So please know that we are.
I understand that,
we know that.
but flat out, the smaller communities are not going to have the monies necessary for any kind of match that you think, is going to need to come forward for this. And so any type of funding, it's going to need to come from another source besides the cities with some type of match or something, because, it just isn't
Well,
there.
I think it's a priority for all of us. So hopefully we can find a
Right, but
solution.
you got to keep saying it, or people assume that it's not important any longer. So.
Any other questions? Oh, thank you. It says Wayne Williams, but I think it's Commissioner Williams, Holly Williams. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is Holly. So in answer to Sharon's question, in Monument, they do have one area that is impacted by freight trains, but then they have a bridge, and they also have the Pikes Peak RTA and the Baptist Road RTA did an overpass over the other one. So we have one in Monument, they would have one intersection that's affected by this, and that would be it. So other than that, continue to make my plug to make sure that, Colorado Springs is, if there does end up being a route around to DIA, Colorado Springs receives its fair share by making sure that we have a route over to our airport, because our airport's better. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Other questions? I have one also, but I'll reserve that. Go ahead.
Okay,
Andy?
thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Spencer. Andy Gunning, great information. Thank you for that. I'm just curious, and I know the timing's a little bit awkward, but with the federal infrastructure bill that just passed the Senate, it's over in the House now, lots of opportunities. I know there was a lot of money there for Amtrak, not as much money, but a big tranche for intercity rail as well. Then a big portion as well for safety projects like grade separation efforts and stuff like that. But that's money that's programmed now for the next 5 years. A lot of it's going to be administered through grant applications, competitive grants, and so forth. So that's money, a lot of it out there for the next 5 years. Given where you guys are in your planning process, I'm just curious what the strategy might be.
Right. So the strategy all along has been, let's look at as many different funding pots as possible. With the new federal money that is available, looking at that, there's so many different components that go into producing this passenger rail system. When you talk about safety and stations, you talk about grade passes, at grade or above grade or whatever it may be. It's not just Amtrak money we're looking at. There's state of good repair money that we're looking at. There's, about, I want to say 7 different pots of money that the Federal Railroad Administration, particularly for passenger rail, has to look at. And so it's not just Amtrak's money. There's safety money there. There's state of good repair money. And so we're really trying to focus on all the different components of our project and all the different components of funding and how we can mix and match to what best serves that particular point in the project. So really focused on kind of broadening the expanse of just looking at Amtrak or just looking at safety funding, just kind of encapsulating everything and really trying to leave no stone unturned. It's a big bill. It's about 2,700 pages, and I spent quite some time digging through it, really trying to dig in and see where we can kind of leverage what we currently have and what we can have in the future.
Okay, very good. And I noticed on one of the charts, this is Commissioner Stana, looking, if I read it correctly, and maybe I misread it, but it was looking at 196,000 passengers in 2035. Was that the number I saw?
Yes, that's an Amtrak ridership projection.
Okay, so that's 500 a day? Is that just the Amtrak data, the Southwest
Yeah.
Chief data? That's not
So that's-
anything else that might be on there.
No, that's Amtrak's ridership model. And without disparaging our friends at Amtrak too much, their model is not quite as sophisticated as the CDOT statewide travel demand model. We've got different contexts that we've in assumptions that we've been able to overlay into our ridership projections, showing quite a bit of a difference there. Amtrak's, again, their model is really based on kind of that Northeast corridor or California, really dense concentrations of cities right now, which is a little bit different than what we have. They weren't able to kind of incorporate some of the transit numbers that we're able to leverage with our partners. And so, again, that was from Amtrak, a very, very light in pencil, kind of a first look at what they think may be possible. We think we're going to be able to leverage kind of those transit systems, long distance lines, and really kind of capture a larger area of riders. And so, while again, it's not wrong. Again, this is modeling. It's all kind of unpredictable for the future. But we feel a little bit more comfortable with our statewide transportation demand modeling efforts. And again, working with Amtrak to kind of true up some of those assumptions, kind of figure out where they got their numbers and kind of align those more closely with what we're expecting.
Okay, thank you. I would be interested in, perhaps this could be just forwarded to PPACG and then I can take a look at it. I'd be interested in what the demand modeling is predicting. And this would be the more broad numbers as opposed to just the Southwest Chief numbers. Because when you take 196,000 and divide it by 365 days a year, you're talking about 500 riders a day, which is minuscule. It's almost a non-existent number when you take a look at like Washington, D.C., which has 700,000 riders daily on the subway. And I don't know what the surface rail is, but it's probably at least 80,000 a day. And I bet you it's actually a lot more than that. So 500 a day is minuscule, almost not countable. It's so small. So there's got to be some other number that is producing some kind of demand prediction. And I'd be interested in seeing the broader scale numbers. So thanks.
I can send you guys that information. Within our alternatives analysis, we've kind of got our initial look at ridership. And so I'll pull out that section and when I send over my PowerPoint, I'll get that to you guys as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Spencer? All right, hearing none. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Again, I will send that ridership numbers, that information over to you. I'll get the PowerPoint to you guys. And just want to reiterate, please reach out to me if you have any questions. Want to hear more information. I am always around, happy to talk about front range passenger rail. And again, thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thanks, Spencer. We'll be in touch.
All righty. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, pivoting a little bit away from transportation. We've been transportation heavy in the workshops, last one and this one, but moving over to water. There's a pretty interesting renewable water project that folks at Monument and I know Amy Latham is on the call as well with Cherokee Metro District. So not sure between Mayor Wilson, Mike Foreman here in the room, Amy on the Zoom, who might be kind of taking the lead to kick things off, but I'll turn it over to Don. Yeah,
Yep, I'll go ahead and just do some brief introductions and overview. The North El Paso County region has been working on the entities up there have been working on a kind of a renewable water project and a better way to serve our customers. And as this project has moved on, we've developed ideas that serve more than just the northern area. In fact, a much wider range. I believe we have Amy Latham of Cherokee Metro District on Zoom with us. She's been a big part of this and a big help to this. We also have our town manager, Mike Foreman, here. And what we've come up with is a long-term renewable water project system that, like I said, that can serve a much larger area and build some redundancies and cooperation with other entities. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Foreman, our town manager, to kind of go into the project a little.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for allowing us to make this presentation to you. And I know Amy Latham would Cherokee Metro will be on here, and also Jesse Schaefer will join us in helping with this presentation. El Paso County has recently, El Paso County local governments in the state of Colorado received ARPA funding intended for projects such as what we'll review with you, the Loop project. In addition, the federal government approved trillions of dollars of infrastructure funding. All this funding is intended for water projects that qualify for both of these funding sources. The project is El Paso County is developed extensively at urban densities. This has been largely based on the Denver Basin water, which is rapidly running out. Denver Basin water is not renewable and it has a finite lifespan. These areas are split between a dozen towns and special districts. As you know, in Monument, we provide our water to a certain part of the town, but in other parts of town, we have 3 or 4 water districts that supply water to the parts of town.
Can we get the next slide, please?
Yep, I'm sorry. There we go. All right. Each has been trying for years to obtain a renewable water supply. Currently, we don't have renewable water supply. We basically rely on the Denver Basin. Substantial water rights are owned and available in distant areas, but a lack of an economical transmission system is available today. The Denver Basin, next slide, please. The Denver Basin, let me describe a little bit about this. The aquifer system that stretches from Greeley to Pueblo, the greatest depth and productivity is along the Palmer Divide. It's made up of hard sedimentary bedrock such as sandstones, mudstones, and conglomerates. It's not refilled by snow and rain. Under pressure, once pressure is reduced, productivity of the wells falls. It's treated uniquely under Colorado water law. It's declining significantly in productivity. There's only a few decades after first being tapped. Next slide. The Denver Basin wells decline in productivity, less water for each dollar invested. The productivity declines in existing wells must be replaced by drilling new wells. This is exactly what the town of Monument and several of the water districts around us are doing today. The town of Monument invested $22 million last year, and most of that money is going to be drilling new wells and providing for treatment of the water that comes out of those new wells. Why would we do that instead of providing a loop that would not only provide renewable water for the entire northern area, but also partner with the eastern part of El Paso County to provide a loop that goes all the way from the south, all the way up north and out to the east. That's what our plan is. Next slide. Let's talk about some of the northern utilities that first started this discussion. I think it's the next slide we have to go to. Yeah, there we go. Let's talk about the northern utilities that kind of came together and started this. The Water and Sand District of Woodmore, the Town of Monument, Denala, Triview, Forest Lakes, and Palmer Lake have all come together. We all have limited surface water rights. A large majority of the production is from our Denver Basin wells. We have to treat wastewater at 2 facilities and discharge into Monument Creek. Some return flows are recaptured via exchange, but most of our return flows aren't recaptured. This loop system would allow each one of us to recapture our return flows. That's an important part of this that reduces our cost. All have required additional surface water rights in some form, but we can't get those to the Town of Monument. We can't get those to Woodmore. We can't get those to Triview currently. And as you know, the northern part of El Paso County is developing rapidly. Next slide, please. How does it affect the eastern utilities and who's involved? Well, Cherokee Metro District, Meridian Ranch, Woodman Hills, Paintbrush Hills, Four-Way Ranch, and Sterling Ranch are all involved in this. Cherokee has a unique renewable groundwater rights in the upper Black Squirrel Basin. All others have almost entirely dependent on the Denver Basin wells. Denver Basin in this area is thinner and less productive. Wastewater is treated at 2 facilities for discharge in the UBS basin. Once again, the eastern part of El Paso County is developing rapidly. There's almost no renewable water outside of Cherokee. Meridian and Woodman share a small renewable well. Next slide, please. How does this affect the southern utilities? You've got Fountain, Security, Widefield, Colorado Center. They're all outside the Denver Basin. They're supplied with renewable surface water rights, still running into capacity limitations. As you know, several entities down there are having trouble servicing their development today. Treated wastewater is discharged to Fountain Creek. This area is developing rapidly, and PFAS issues have led to operational challenges. Next slide, please. The CMD involvement. Cherokee Metro District may seem to be an unusual participant in this project. CMD has a northern water line, which is currently underutilized. You can see on this map. CMD has water supply for its current service area, but has limited resources to serve future Highway 94 corridor development. CMD has been recharging the aquifer for a decade, but it is unlikely that all future development could be supplied from the UBS. New surface water introduced to UBS can be used and reused, raising water levels further. And they're building a reverse osmosis and prosecuting sustainable replacement plan today. Next slide, please. So can we solve varied current and future water problems for a dozen regional utilities? That's what we all got together and said, how can we solve this problem? Northern and southern utilities discharge water into the Fountain Monument watershed. Most reusable return flows are not currently used. Exchanges up Monument Creek are already nearly maximized. Exchanges up Fountain Creek are difficult and not guaranteed. If there were a way to pull water off of Fountain Creek near the southern county border, store it, and deliver it to the entities listed above, this water could be used. It would also allow northern utilities with surface water rights to access them. A pipeline from the southern part of the county to the north is the solution, and that is the project that we're talking about. Next slide. This is the Loop project. How would it affect us? It would use the Chilcoot ditch to deliver water to Callahan Reservoir. It would treat that water and pump north. It serves the highest growth area of the county. It's independent of the city of Colorado Springs, and it's only in the El Paso County jurisdiction. It replaces significant volume produced from Denver Basin wells and allows for continued growth, brings new water into the UBS Basin via return flows, provides full redundancy for all utilities involved. Next slide, please. It diverts the return flows and first use water from Fountain Creek to Chilcoot Ditch. It delivers to the Callahan Reservoir. It treats water to a near potable standard at on-site treatment facility and pumps the water north via several pump stations. It delivers to users along the way. Users can apply for final treatment to meet all potable standards. Next slide, please. So how many people does this serve? As you can see on the slide, there's about 8,100 in the Monument Tri-View area, and really that number is growing. We expect the census probably to be over 10,000. You've got Denala and Glen Eagle have about 7,650, Palmer Lake, Woodmore, and also I think we left Forest Lakes off here. Forest Lakes probably is going to have somewhere around 6,000 homes out there when they get done. I mean, 600 homes, sorry. Estimates based on the mix of 2020 census, municipality estimates, and 2010 to 2019 projections. Growth outside the city has been slowed by limited and expensive water. Not all of our current population will be directly served, but future population expansion will be. Northern and eastern utilities have approximately 29% of El Paso County's Colorado Springs population. That's over 250,000 in the 2019 estimate. That includes southern utilities. That percentage increases to 58%. Next slide, please. A lot of regional solutions have been sought in the past. Dozens of studies have been done individually by utilities. We brought all those studies together and are reviewing them currently. As you can see, some of these people have been collaborating for over 20 years. Next slide, please. What have we learned from past regional studies? Complete reliance on Denver Basin supplies is economically and physically unsustainable. There has to be cooperation and regionalization. Actions completed based on the findings. The northern utilities have acquired renewable water rights lower in the watershed, also acquired raw water storage facilities lower in the watershed. There needs to be a pathway to be able to deliver the service areas. Next slide. What is the potential water yield? First use water, such as Denver Basin, can be reused to extinction. Taking into account losses in transit, it is possible that each 100 acre feet of effluent could produce 124 to 182 acre feet of reuse water. This also applies to first use surface water rights held by many participants. Even in drought years where surface water yields may be reduced, reuse water is constant. Storage allows flexibility, could allow for doubling of first use water right yields. Next slide, please. What are the alternatives? Many smaller alternatives have been explored. The loop satisfies many needs. It allows for recapture of return flows within El Paso County, allows utilities to transport Fountain and Monument Creek water rights, and provides redundancy to all participants. Another possible alternative is a hybrid system with Colorado Springs Utility. Currently, we're doing a study with both entities and trying to figure out which one is the best efficient and most effective for all involved. Storage and conveyance into Colorado Springs system. Sorry, I've got the block there. Currently being studied by a wider group along with other projects. Storage and conveyance into Colorado Springs utility system works similarly to the loop. Full treatment at Bailey Treatment Plant would be available, and then delivery through the Colorado Springs system. Next slide, please. What is the cost of the loop? As you can see here, the total cost that we're estimating today is about $134 million. How can these entities fund that individually? No one can. And how can we all do it as a group? It's going to be very difficult to be able to fund $134 million. That's why we're here at PPACG to talk about how we can use other alternatives to be able to fund this. As you can see, there's two other opportunities right now, ARPA funding, and then also the infrastructure funding that was approved by the federal government just over a couple of weeks ago. These capital costs pulled together from past studies, and the new study will provide a new estimate. When we complete both studies, we'll have a new estimate that we feel like will be somewhere in this ballpark. The final O&M cost per acre foot is highly competitive with other sources, especially the Denver Basin wells. One thing, if we're able to get money from the federal government, we're able to get money from ARPA. Remember, all these people not only are citizens of El Paso County, but they're our individual customers. And what we're trying to do is lower the cost to the final customer. So when we're delivering water to our customer, we want to do it at the lowest cost available. And so by using federal funding to whittle down some of this $134 million, it lowers the cost to our final customer. Next slide, please. What are some of the challenges? The entire project is technically and legally feasible. We can do this project, but it's expensive. Raising funds only from participants would require major rate hikes. Without it, some providers will be forced to keep drilling expensive Denver Basin wells. further stressing the current system. It requires significant new regional infrastructure, requires regulatory budget approval from many groups. Next slide. We can talk about development all day long. We can talk about building new facilities, new homes and everything like that, but water is absolute. Without water, none of the other issues in El Paso County will matter. It doesn't matter what we do, what we plan, how much we want to bring to the county. If we don't have water, none of it works. Next slide. What are the next steps? Currently, we're carrying out a cost study. It's open to more participants. After completion, we're going to compare this loop project to the CSU study. We'll develop a final list of founding members. We leave the door for anybody to join us. We're developing a funding plan from participants and other groups. And then we're underway. The next step will be engineering and construction, and then finally water delivery. What are some of the project needs? Next slide, please. We can either continue on an economically unsustainable Denver Basin path or take this opportunity to convert to renewable water. Our citizens are asking us every day, when are we going to bring renewable water to the northern entities? And I know the eastern entities are asking the same thing. This will be expensive, but so will continuing to drill Denver Basin wells. We're looking for regional and governmental partners to meaningfully share the upfront project cost. More partners help to keep their water rates lower. Federal infrastructure appropriations offer opportunity to accelerate the project. Previous federal projects such as Frying Pan, Arkansas, have been foundational to Southern Colorado's development. The project would allow for continued growth in the county while protecting aquifer levels for small capacity users. Next slide, please. Here's two maps that show the overall development for this project, the Loop project. And I'll be glad, I know Amy's on here and Jesse's on here if y'all wanted to add anything, but we'll be glad to take any questions if you have any.
All right. So are there any questions for this proposed loop project? And I've got some comments on this. Yes, please go ahead, Mayor Wilson.
Yes, I just wanted to offer Ms. Lathan and Jesse a moment if they had anything additional to share before we go to questions.
Okay, very good, please.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it. Mike, thanks for being there in person and sharing this really, really important presentation. Thanks to everyone there in the room and for your attention on this. We're very excited about the potential that we have here. And I just want to say on behalf of Cherokee, you'll see on this map, the second one here on your right, from the northern part of our little district there that you see Cherokee Metropolitan District as an enclave within the city of Colorado Springs. You'll see just to the north, there's a kind of a red triangle there. We have a water distribution tank there at Tamlin and Mark Shuffle. And from there up into the Black Forest area where you see a blue dot just to the east of Monument, we have a significant water transmission line from a well field up there called Sundance. And right now, Cherokee brings in a very, very small percentage of its full water portfolio from Sundance. So that water transmission line delivers water to the south. We really strongly believe that this is a much more useful, ethical, meaningful regional asset for the entire region if we reverse flow and participate in this kind of a loop to provide renewable, reusable water resources to the north, and then people can pick up along the way. So that infrastructure is in place. Obviously, as you've seen here, there needs to be funding to support the completion of the loop and some of the facilities that will be necessary along the way. It's just a very exciting, very regional project. And so we really want to be able to use our infrastructure in this way And we do believe strongly, I think it's important to state that there needs to be redundancy in this type of a system. So even though there's a study going on through Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority and certainly contemplating the use of CSU infrastructure as well, the loop infrastructure is important as well for a variety of reasons, including water rights that may not be able to utilize SDS. And the ability to have that kind of a redundant system based on just the volume of users, just to say the least. And so we do view this not as a competitive kind of a project to the study that's going on with Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority, but absolutely a complementary project and a redundancy for the system for the entire region for the long term. So we are excited to be part of it, and just will answer any questions that you have. And of course, there's a lot of work to be done, but this is very, very possible in the near future.
And Mr. Schaefer?
Yes, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Don. I echo Mike and Amy's words and thoughts on this particular project. The great thing about it is there's something in it for everybody, even for those entities who may participate that don't have any renewable water sources already in their water rights portfolio for their citizens. This project can benefit them. I think Mike highlighted it very well. We call it the loop because we're spinning water molecules literally in a loop. For those entities that are dependent on Denver Basin groundwater with an eye toward surface water in the future, renewable water supplies in the future, participating in the loop project would enable them to reuse their reusable effluent or their reusable credits, as we call them, to extinction. They take some water molecules out of the loop, deliver it to their customers. Some of it comes back through the sanitary sewer collection systems, gets treated and discharged into the river system, either Monument Creek or Fountain Creek. And then down south, it gets rediverted, say at the Chilcott Ditch, transported into the Callahan Reservoir, retreated and sent back north through the loop where it gets dropped off yet again. And you do this recycling over and over and over again. It's a converging series. It doesn't quite get to 2 times, but it certainly pluses up anybody's water supply. And what that means for those people on the finite Denver Basin groundwater is it will prolong that groundwater for them, if nothing else. It will also slow down the well drilling. Many people, when they hit a certain threshold in their communities, either based off of public demands for water or also off of single family equivalent projections and things of that nature, they have to drill a new well. Wells are expensive, and the more wells we drill, the worse the Denver Basin gets. We continue to deplete them, and then you add more wells on top of that, well-to-well interference gets greater. And so it's diminishing returns with the Denver Basin groundwater. It always has been. Recently, though, it's getting worse and worse, and it's going to continue to get worse. But with a loop system like this, it will certainly slow down, relax, or retard some of that well drilling, because it's going to give entities the ability to reuse their Denver Basin supplies to extinction. And then for those entities who have secured some renewable water supplies, mostly down in the lower reaches of the Fountain Creek, I know Woodmore, we've got a significant water supply portfolio where we own surface water rights off of Fountain Creek at the Chilcott Ditch. A number of other entities own renewable supplies in the FMIC, the Fountain Mutual Irrigation Ditch Company system. And there's a handful of others that have a water supply portfolio on Fountain Creek, renewable supplies that are obviously generated from rainfall and snow melt every year. They've got a myriad of Fountain Creek water rights up and down Fountain Creek. So the Loop project would also enable them to reach out, divert their surface water rights and their renewable water rights and bring them into the system as well. So that's really the main attributes and the benefits to the Loop system is, as I said at the beginning, there's something in it for everybody, and there's something beneficial in it for everybody. That's all I would add for now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I have some comments. I'll reserve those. But go ahead, Sharon.
Ooh, Fountain is really popular today, aren't we? Huh? Oh, well, I just, it looks like to me, and I did listen to the presentation you gave the county commissioners, kind of got the big overview. This is my kind of my second time through it. It just looks to me like your pipeline, whichever way it's going, is really going through established residential neighborhoods. When I look at Fountain and Security and Wype, and maybe even part of Colorado Springs, I'm sorry, I just can't see that far. But it just really looks like you're going through a lot of established neighborhoods. So how are you going to address the issues with potentially homes and businesses and roads and utilities that are already existing in those areas where you're considering putting your pipeline? Is it going to be all underground? You're not going to bother people with your drilling? It's maybe too early in the process for that question.
I'll let Amy address that one.
Sure. And it is probably, I think the best way, the last thing you said is absolutely right. It's too early in the process. This is a very rough schematic, and it will take design, engineering, easements, et cetera. So this would be an underground water pipeline, and it's way too early to kind of take a look at how that would be aligned. This is the rough alignment that comes from some past studies. So that's some of the work that's being done now.
Is your thought to have all the drilling be done? I don't know how to express it. So you don't have to tear up the ground up above it and just, what's the drilling? Boring. Thank you. Boring. Yes. Yes.
Well, yeah, in term, I mean, obviously there's going to have to be a full study of where to actually lay the pipeline, and it is boring. It is definitely putting in a pipeline. So sometimes that disturbs ground, but that is not, certainly that's got to be done in a very responsible way. And the most effective way to do that, and you start with the efficiencies of public rights of way. And so you kind of start looking there, and then you go from there to see how you can actually align the pipeline. And Jesse, there might be some older studies that you can refer to that help define that a little bit more, but we're very early in that process for the connection to be made.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. It's a bit early to be focusing in heavily on pipeline alignments. I think Amy said it best. These maps that you see before you today, they highlight a big picture, and the lines are generally located to illustrate the point of how the loop loops water molecules around. We do have several studies with several different alignments, each with their own merits and their own challenges. There's an eastern alignment that would skirt all the way around the city and come back in and connect to the Tamlin tank. And there's a few other alignments that we've explored in the past. And that'll be something that gets refined as this project moves forward. It'll ultimately get refined by, quite honestly, cost and ease of permitting. And so we are not at that particular stage of the design yet, but that's where we aim to go to. So that's the best explanation in answering your question I can give at this point.
And I think there's a piece of that that's one of the parts that's so great about this is that's what makes the Cherokee Sundance line so important, because it's in place already. It's 17 miles of pipeline that's operating. It's there, it's laid already. Nothing is to be disturbed there. And then there's significant right of way for some of the alignment. So work to be done, but we've got a good piece of the puzzle in place.
All right. Any other questions?
Hey, Stan, this is Travis. I have a question if I could.
Yes, Travis, go ahead.
And actually, it's more of a comment. You know, when I was in office in Monument serving as mayor, you know, water was the one thing that kept me up at night. And as Don and Mike mentioned in their presentation, you know, it's been going on for decades with no solution ever presented, really. And so I just wanted to take a moment to really commend Don and Mike and Amy and Jesse for bringing forward this with some initiative to help solve the problem. And second point I'd like to make is that on the alignment, I was one of the engineers that actually worked on the alignment from Sundance to Tamlin for Cherokee when I was in the private sector. And it took us, I think it was over 2 years to establish that alignment. And so just a comment on that point. And so anyway, just again, commendations to those folks for the initiative and bringing us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment too. Before
Yes,
you kind
please.
of wrap it up with comments. Had a briefing with Mike and Mayor Wilson and Amy and others about a month or so ago. So I thought this is really something that's germane to our conversations that we've been having around growth issues. And as Mike mentioned, we don't really need to plan for as much population growth and transportation demand if we can't serve them and we don't have the water resources and other needs to take care of our population. So something like this really is transformational, and just thinking about the timing with the conversations on the federal infrastructure bill. And I know that Senator Hickenlooper was part of the bipartisan group that helped craft that there may be some opportunities to try to approach a project like this with some of those federal opportunities that are out there. I maybe used the misplaced example where I compared this with the I-25 GAP project, where we were able to come together as a community and a state to figure out how to pay for $375 million for that project. This is about a third of that cost. So it seems doable when you look at a bunch of different possible opportunities with existing relief money, federal relief money, and the infrastructure bill that hasn't quite been authorized yet, but that may be coming soon. So just wanted to see if this is something that our board wants to lean into.
Great, thank you. And a quick question, and then I have some comments. The first question, I think there was a number given when this was presented to the Board of County Commissioners, and I just don't remember the number, but how many acre feet of water could potentially be recycled by this annually? Do you have that number? Do you have it in gallons or?
Jesse, I think you've got that, don't you?
Yeah, I guess the short answer is it can convey, it certainly can be expandable in the future. It can convey a lot of acre foot of water on an annual basis. I guess the presentation that we gave to the county commissioners referenced a 6,700 acre foot number. And this is basically adding all of our supplies together, assuming some wastewater return flows, and then cranking that around the system in order to get up to that 6,700 acre feet. And that would be people's renewable water supplies that this system would enable transport of, be able to draft those off the river and send it into the system. And it also captures the concept of reusing everybody's return flows, be it return flows from Denver Basin first use supplies or return flows from surface water first use supplies. So I think the number was 6,700 acre feet, but that was just a number that was referencing initially what we would anticipate this system to be able to deliver. Now, that's based on a water rights side, not necessarily based on existing demands and existing growth side. So for example, of that 6,700 acre feet, I would surmise to say that probably half of that number is currently subscribed in terms of overall demands by the publics, the conglomerate publics that would be served by this project. So it would allow everybody to grow into that particular water supply as time moves forward. And then as time moves forward, if people acquire additional supplies that can be transported into this system, then obviously the transport number goes up over time. So it's a system that starts out able to serve everybody's current needs and a portion of their future needs. And then of course, many years down the road, it can be expandable to serve even greater numbers than that.
And
Great.
just for perspective on that number, just as a snapshot, Cherokee serves just over 25,000 resident customers, and plus all of Schriever Air Force Base, their water and wastewater needs. So on top of that 25,000, you can look at the number of personnel there at Schriever that we serve daily. And in 2020, we produced our largest year, and that was about 3,250 acre feet of water for the full year. So that's just a snapshot of persons served.
Yeah, Schriever Space Command, I just heard the note. So yeah, thank you very much. We got this presentation last week at the Board of County Commissioners, and ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, I'm deeply, deeply intrigued by the concept. I would encourage the representatives we have here from our two senators' offices to dig deeper into this idea. Let me give you a sense of the scope of this idea that I think is really intriguing. So the largest water, I went on the internet while the presentation was going, so I might be wrong because, you know, it's hard to do internet searches in the middle of a meeting, right? But the largest water recycling system right now in the state of Colorado, I read some data that said there's 12 of them in the state, but the largest one is Denver, which recycles about 2,800, about 1 billion gallons of water annually, but it does not push it to potable water. It just pushes it to gray water. So it cannot be used for potable uses. This project proposal here is potentially 6,000 to 7,000 acre feet of potable water, human consumable water. That would make it the largest recycling project in the state of Colorado easily, if I could find the right data on the internet. And we are really in I think, a very important search to find ways to allow us to either reduce our reliance on non-renewable resources of water, but in addition to that, also figure out how we can grow in El Paso County and the city of Colorado Springs and our other municipalities, because there's a high demand for people that want to move here, and we want to do the best we can to accommodate that. So I'm deeply intrigued by this project, especially for certain things about it coming back entirely to potable, human usable water, and also the fact that it actually takes advantage of an enormous amount of existing infrastructure. And if I recall right, you all can correct me if I'm wrong, if I understood correctly, at least for your projections right now, I think you're going through all the cost numbers and everything, but it was, you mentioned last week, 160-ish million to make it happen, some number like that, which I'm sure, you know, will end up, if we go further with it, need to be adjusted or addressed. But anyway, when you think about, yeah, it's expensive, but in the overall scheme of things, 160 million is less than half the price of the gap. It's not that much if you're talking about trying to sustain a community to allow for growth and reduce reliance on non-renewable resources. It's not that much of an investment. So I don't know if this would end up being the final configuration or if there are other choices out there. But what I do feel very strongly about is we've got to get serious in this community about doing something like this, which will allow us to really do great things, I think, for our citizens. Now, with that in mind, I would encourage, again, Mr. Huerta from Senator Hickenlooper's office, and I think we have representatives from Senator Bennett's office to maybe engage with us on this concept, because in order for us to make this happen, whenever that is, after a few years of deliberations, discussions, planning, and getting things lined up, we'll likely need federal funds for it. And I think it would be a huge positive impact, big project, notable kind of thing that everybody involved, should it be delivered successfully, would be able to take credit for it. So I just want to make that point. I'm deeply intrigued by it, and I would ask all that are listening to this to think more deeply about this, maybe go get your own presentation about it, and let's keep socializing this idea throughout the community and see where that can take us. So those are my comments. And all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
no,
Andy.
And I don't know specifically what the next steps might be, but we'll keep engaging with the town staff that are working on it, and Amy and her group, and see how we as a body can help, you know, move the conversation along and engage in any way that might be supportive. So, okay.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you all so much.
Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
you, everybody.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, our last two items were sort of two catch-alls. One was just kind of I think a quick update we were going to give on the greenhouse gas emissions state rulemaking that was to be dropped on Friday. John, late breaking news you want to share?
Yeah, it was in fact dropped on Friday. We should be getting the link soon and we'll distribute that widely. We will also put this a link to this page in the email for everybody, but it's the CDOT GHG gas emissions rulemaking page. If you're interested in becoming a stakeholder in the process, if you scroll down a little bit there, Jess, there's a link that you can click on to get on their mailing list and everything else. So it's up a little bit, but that's the important thing there, since we're way over time, is we'll send you this link. If the original, my understanding is the original deadline for comments was October 12th. My understanding is that because they dropped it late on Friday to sort of make up for the weekend that you would have missed if you were trying to look at the information, that they added 3 days to the rulemaking. And now I believe the comment period will run all the way to October 15th. So I think that's the short answer of what it is. And we still haven't seen it to read it. So we'll let you know when we get a chance.
Yeah, I guess one other date, I'm sorry, go ahead.
PPACG is in there as a stakeholder, correct?
Correct.
Representing all of us, so that smaller communities that may not have a person there, we are interacting with you with our concerns. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, but that being said, any jurisdiction or individual can sign up and make their own comments. So you're certainly not limited just because you're a member of PPACG that you have to go with however we're approaching it. But yeah, you can do your individual, you can do PPACG, and quite frankly, you could do both. I'm sorry.
You're going to.
I interpret for you, yes. And Commissioner Williams has been to some of the meetings as well, and she's been sort of knee deep in all of this as well. So
one other date I'll mention real quick is they did mention the public hearing dates that they're going to hold across the state. And these, I think, so far intended to be hybrid meetings where you can testify in person or submit written comments. The one for our region is going to be on September the 24th from 3 to 7 p.m. So, and we'll
Great.
get that out as well with information that we share on this.
Andy, if I could just ask, and maybe you've done it already and I haven't had a chance to see it, but could you maybe send that link to the board?
Yes.
And
absolutely.
that allows people to just click on the link instead of having to write down that link from the screen here.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, we will get that out today. Very good. So more to come on that. The other kind of mini topic in the same subset was federal funding equity, and I'll just kick it off and John will jump in here. It's been something that we've talked about, I think, a little bit with the legislative committee, a little bit with the board, but the crux of the issue is every time the feds reauthorize a transportation bill, we fall further and further behind because we're using older data that's part of the formula calculation, kind of jumping to where we are right now. Then we can fill in some of the details. I think there was an effort, and again, appreciate Senator Hickenlooper signed on to this to do a study bill to attach it to the federal infrastructure bill to fix that, to basically study how can we fix the federal funding formula and update it with more updated population data and things like that. And apparently we don't think that amendment was attached to the final bill that was passed out of the Senate and onto the House for the federal infrastructure bill. So now there's an effort to try to address it in the House at least and see if there can be a study effort to update that formula instead of relying on data from, say, the year 2000 on population. Since we've grown so much, as have other Western states, we'd like to see that updated at some point. Hold the other states harmless perhaps, but at least start getting our fair share on a federal level with those funds, because apparently every time there's a reauthorization bill, we and South Carolina and Texas are the three, especially, that are disproportionately impacted by falling further and further behind. But other thoughts, Sean?
Nothing more to mention. Just that those three states are become donor states because again, when I believe it was Safety Lou was passed, instead of going by the traditional funding formulas based on population and lane miles, they said, well, whatever you got last time is what you're going to get this time. So it sort of froze those Rust Belt states in place. So that way, with their shrinking population, they wouldn't lose. while that was done for them, at the same time, has sort of hurt the fast growing western states. So the three that we mentioned, Texas, South Carolina, and Colorado, become donors. But at the same time, there are several other states that have lost ground while they're still receiving funding, not the same proportional funding that they did back in 2009. And they're interested on signing on as well. So we're working the issue.
Yeah, we're working closely with folks in Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Nevada, partners that have the same concerns and same interests. That we thought we'd be the squeaky wheel on this, because if you don't ask, it's never going to get fixed. And I think that's all we had on that. Yeah.
Very good. Any questions on this one from anybody online or in the room here? All right, hearing none, let's go to our last item. And maybe this is very brief, but
It was just an open discussion item for legislative committee members of the board, other board members, to talk about kind of takeaways, things we're learning that we need to maybe focus on from a legislative standpoint. I made a list of a couple of things already from this morning's conversation. Yeah.
Dick,
Sharon,
did you
is
want
it-
to say anything? Dick Elsner?
Not a whole lot right now. You know, whenever they push electric vehicles, I always worry about, you know, if you push them up in the mountains. And Sharon, your comment was really good about, yes, it takes 10 to 15% longer to charge, and they don't hold as much charge. And then, of course, do have the issue that we've got 2 charging stations in Park County. While they were doing that, I was looking at a Ford Mustang, which had 300 miles in its range, but it took 11 hours to come up to a full charge. So, you know, I'm a little concerned in the middle of winter, if you have an electric vehicle that gets stuck, you can, you know, it doesn't take long to run out of battery if you're using the battery to heat your car.
I think kind of to add an additional comment to Commissioner Elsner on that is, you know, in our western slope, our mountain terrains, you've got these mountain passes. So when an electric vehicle might say it has a range of 300 miles, when it's got to push that car up a mountain pass, it doesn't have a range of 300 miles. And I used a hybrid electric vehicle a couple years back, charged it up, and then drove it over Vale Pass. By the time I got to the top of Vale Pass, the electric charge was consumed. Thank goodness it was a hybrid vehicle. So I had an engine to continue to drive it. So there are these highly problematic considerations about electric vehicles on the western slope and in our mountain terrain. And I worry sometimes that that never seems to be part of these conversations. So I appreciate Commissioner Elsner bringing that point up. Thank you.
Yeah, and I've got one other thing, you know, House Bill 21-1077 last year created a legislative task force concerning tax policy. And it spelled out who was going to be on it. And, you know, we had one person from a statutory county, one from a home rule county. I was appointed as the representative from a statutory county on that committee. So anybody want to talk tax policy with me, please do, because it's going to be starting. We've got one report due in October, and then which will be probably very preliminary. And then we're supposed to be going through all of the ways Colorado taxes people and see if it's a good way to do it, fair, or what changes might be recommended to the legislature, which then, of course, if it changes taxes, it'd have to go to the vote of the people.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate any comments on that?
Commissioner Elsner, I will say that because I have no real personal life, I do get into those esoteric things like tax policy. So if you're wanting to chat over the phone, or next time you're in Colorado Springs, I'll buy you lunch. I would be very interested in chatting about that. So thank you.
I would love to do that with you.
And we now need to ask Andy to let John loose every once in a while so he can have a real personal life going forward. So
We're trying.
I
All
think
right.
it shows that while some of these bills have passed, as they're enacted, we need to be at the table with realistic comments about, the car made it at the top of the pass. When they're talking about box trucks and different things, I think of people that rent U-Hauls and budgets and everything to move. Years ago, they used to have, when we used to work for one of those companies, you couldn't even get people to plug the diesel truck in overnight when it was going to be cold. I'm thinking to myself, if they're moving into an apartment and the electric plug's way down there, they're not going to want to leave their goods way down there at the other end of the parking lot all night because they didn't finish unloading while it charges. So you're going to potentially have a lot of issues that need to be addressed in terms of transportation. I just think of all the goods that run up and down to the, Cripple Creek and those areas up there. Manitou, you have trucks running out of fuel, quote unquote fuel charge on the way up there. And I think there's a lot of concerns that need to be addressed beyond just getting stations where you need them. So it's a big, interesting topic, and we just got to be practical about it. Really, really practical and down to earth about it. A lot of common sense about it, not just, this sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And I don't know what PPACG is planning with regard to the legislative committee, but it might not be a bad idea to kind of start maybe you're already planning this, to do some planning sessions, kind of getting us a little bit geared up for the next legislative session. I think doing it earlier is always highly beneficial to us because we can review our trifold. We can maybe talk about some legislation that maybe didn't get anywhere last year that might come back, that might be of concern to us. And we can kind of start to get the gears rolling. And it's never too late, frankly, even in the summer, to get ready for the fall.
Yeah, a great point. I did, to show that I'm not a horrible boss, I did let Jessica McMullen take the week off. She's in the mountains right now, so that's why she's not here. But she and I, we've talked about getting the legislative committee back together soon. I know she nailed down a date for our legislative roundtable. And it's in mid-October. I forget the exact date. So we have that. So we should start getting our legislative committee together in September so we can start strategizing around what we think we need to get after in the 2022 session. And I do want to mention, I'm sorry, while I get the mic real quick, we have a Representative Thomas Bailey, also from Representative Lamborn's office. So I really appreciate that we have 3 folks from our federal delegation offices here in person and online today. Really, really appreciate that because we focus a lot on state issues, but we have a lot of these topics that we talked about today and at the previous session, we really need to engage more with our federal partners. So we really look forward to doing that in the upcoming session. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So I appreciate, Mr. Bailey, that you're online. And my comments earlier where I was referring to the 2 senators with regard to the water loop project, that just applies to Congressman Lamborn's office as well. So thank you very much.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, one other two quick things. First, in Andy's defense, I have plenty of time. I just don't know what to do with it other than play board games and work, but it's not his fault. But the second thing is the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC is doing a DC fly-in in September. I think it's the 20th through the 24th. I know El Paso County is a sponsor of that, and many of the commissioners will be on that trip. We're working with the chamber to see if we can't have a discussion with transportation, federal highway or DOT folks, as well as having a separate discussion, again, going back to the Intermountain West MPO group with the sort of the states on the equity issue, because again, that's one of the things that even if it's not in this one, it does need to be addressed because it's just kind of flat out unfair, quite frankly. So we need to have, we want to try to have those discussions. So we're working with the chamber and the folks at CDOT to see if we can't put something together during that trip where we have a discussion with the US DOT folks, as well as hopefully if we can reach out and get the assistance of the senators and congressman's office to put together another briefing for the Intermountain West states that are most effective. So if we could ask for your help getting maybe a room and getting all the congressmen and senators of the affected states in one place, that would be much appreciated if we can lean on all 3 of you there.
Yeah, thank you for the input. I can tell you, it's my understanding all 5 El Paso County commissioners will be on that trip. And for myself personally, I'll be staying a little longer, working on the Hill, both on the Senate and the House side with regard to Space Command retention. All right, anything else, gentlemen? Any comments from anybody at this point?
Thank you all for your participation. These have been 2 excellent workshops. We may do more, but really I want to thank John, especially he was the mastermind working with Sharon and Holly Williams and kind of crafting what the topics may be. And Jessica Bechtel. Yeah, just these have been really, really informative. So I think more to come. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll agree with that. And I'll express my appreciation to the PPACG staff, the team for putting together these workshops. These are awesome topics and important for us to talk about. So thank you so much. All right. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your participation and your time. You all have a great Monday.
Thanks. Bye.